The Great Impostor. Tony Curtis took on a dozen identities in The Great Impostor, a 1961 film that seemed too outrageous to be true, yet it was. The movie was based on the real-life exploits of Ferdinand Waldo de Mara, a man who famously impersonated a naval surgeon aboard the HMCS Cayuga in 1951 and reportedly performed successful operations despite having no medical degree. According to Robert Crichton's best-selling biography, de Mara pulled it off by memorizing procedures from textbooks. While some viewers assumed the film was pure Hollywood embellishment, nearly all of its most unbelievable moments were drawn directly from de Mara's actual record. Stories swirled that de Mara himself was consulted during production, though no official credits confirm it. At the time, critics were split. Some praised the film's tightrope walk between satire and suspense, while others questioned whether it glamorized fraud. De Mara was still alive when the film hit theaters, a rarity for biopics of the era, and reportedly found the portrayal flattering. Though not widely marketed as a true story, its legacy as a precursor to modern con artist films, like Catch Me If You Can, is now more widely recognized. Still, few realize this Golden Age favorite was less fiction than fact. The Eddy Duchin Story. The Eddy Duchin Story arrived in 1956 as a polished Hollywood biopic, yet audiences were largely unaware of its basis in the real-life rise and heartbreak of pianist and bandleader Eddy Duchin. By the mid-1930s, Duchin had captivated New York's high society with his blend of classical technique and pop sensibility at the Waldorf Astoria. However, behind the glamour lay personal tragedy. His wife, Marjorie Ulrichs, died shortly after giving birth to their son Peter in 1937, a loss from which Duchin never fully recovered. He was later diagnosed with leukemia in the early 1950s and kept his condition private until his death in 1951. Tyrone Power portrayed Duchin in one of his last completed performances before his own untimely death in 1958, while Carmen Cavallaro performed the film's lush piano sequences, reviving interest in Duchin's music. Although Peter Duchin later became a celebrated musician, his direct involvement in the film's production remains unclear, though some reports suggest he reflected on his portrayal of his father. Despite initial studio hesitation about the personal narrative, the film's success transformed a quiet tragedy into one of the Golden Age's most unexpectedly authentic stories. The Pride of the Yankees. Released in July of 1942, The Pride of the Yankees became one of the earliest box office hits rooted almost entirely in a true story, closely tracing Lou Gehrig's real life. Gary Cooper, unfamiliar with baseball, learned Gehrig's left-handed swing, with filmmakers even reversing footage to make Cooper appear left-handed. The film's emotional centerpiece was the recreation of Gehrig's farewell speech on July 4, 1939, where his iconic line, "The luckiest man on the face of the earth," left crew members visibly moved. Eleanor Gehrig, Lou's widow, served as technical advisor, shaping everything from wardrobe to the film's tone, and reportedly advocating for a dignified portrayal of Lou's decline. At a time when ALS was little known, the film brought national attention to the disease, later called Lou Gehrig's disease in North America. Despite studio doubts about a drama centered on terminal illness, the film earned 11 Academy Award nominations and was added to the National Film Registry in 1998. Legends suggest Eleanor's deep involvement was her way of ensuring Lou would be remembered not just as a ball player, but as a symbol of quiet strength. The House on 92nd Street. The House on 92nd Street looked like a standard noir thriller, but it was rooted in a real-life espionage case that stunned the FBI just 4 years earlier. Loosely dramatizing the takedown of the Duchin spy ring, a Nazi spy network operating inside the United States, the film drew heavily from actual FBI case files. The Bureau didn't just consult, it handed over surveillance footage, lent real agents as extras, and even allowed filming in some of the actual locations used during the investigation. At the center of the real case was William G. Siebold, a German-American who secretly worked as a double agent. His efforts led to the arrest and conviction of 33 spies in 1941, the largest espionage bust in U.S. history at the time. In the film, Siebold's fictional counterpart, Bill Dietrich, carries the weight of that double life, all while being watched from both sides. The film's semi-documentary style was groundbreaking, blending procedural realism with Hollywood tension. Few in the audience realized how closely the plot mirrored classified history. Some critics later questioned how the FBI's deep involvement blurred the line between narrative and propaganda. Stories have long swirled that the Bureau used the film as a soft power tool to rebuild public trust after wartime secrecy. The FBI Story. Released in 1959, the FBI Story presented itself as a patriotic crime drama, but it was, in reality, a meticulously crafted portrait of the Bureau, shaped under the strict supervision of J. Edgar Hoover. While James Stewart's fictional agent, Chip Hardesty, tackled cases inspired by real FBI files, from John Dillinger to wartime espionage, Hoover's influence ran deep. He reviewed the script line by line, sanitizing scenes and polishing the Bureau's image, ensuring nothing controversial or unflattering made it to the screen. Based on Don Whitehead's non-fiction account, the film ultimately reflected Hoover's vision more than the author's. Director Mervyn LeRoy had to clear every major decision with Hoover, and agents were present on set throughout production. The result was a Cold War-era tribute that doubled as government-approved propaganda, even featuring a brief cameo by Hoover himself. The film helped cement the Bureau's mythos in American culture, setting a tone where agents were unwavering heroes, the mission was always just, and the truth was carefully managed. I Want to Live. Released in 1958, I Want to Live shocked audiences with its gritty realism, drawing from the little-known true story of Barbara Graham, a California woman executed for murder in 1955. The film, inspired by court records and press coverage, took dramatic liberties under director Robert Wise, who employed a semi-documentary style to heighten tension. Susan Hayward's Oscar-winning portrayal of Graham as a potentially innocent woman ignited public debate about her guilt and the ethics of capital punishment. Although the film didn't spark a movement, it fueled a national conversation about capital punishment. The intensity of Hayward's performance reportedly left her emotionally drained, particularly after filming the execution scene. The film's title, I Want to Live, often attributed to Graham's last words, remains a point of speculation, as official records of her final statement are inconsistent. Regardless, the film blurred the lines between courtroom drama and real-life tragedy, solidifying its place as an unexpected true story adaptation from Hollywood's golden age. The Desert Rats. The Desert Rats looked like another post-war action flick, but it was rooted in one of World War II's most grueling real-life battles, the Siege of Tobruk. The film followed the Australian 9th Division, famously nicknamed the Rats of Tobruk by German propagandists, who held the Libyan port city against Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps from April to the December of 1941. The resistance became a symbol of Allied grit in the North African campaign. Directed by Robert Wise, the film cast Richard Burton as a British officer, leading a multinational unit, though the real siege was largely defended by Australian forces. While the screenplay took dramatic liberties, much of the film's action, including the risky nighttime raids, reflected actual tactics used by the defenders. These surprise attacks were critical in disrupting German supply lines and keeping morale afloat during the 8-month standoff. Stories persist that the film's raw depiction of desert warfare may have inspired later portrayals, including the 1960s TV series The Rat Patrol. Though not widely marketed as a true story, the Desert Rats drew directly from military history, elevating a little-known chapter into cinematic memory. In Australia, the film helped cement the Desert Rats as national icons, with their real-life endurance under relentless shelling and scorching heat becoming a point of pride. The Magnificent Yankee. In 1950, MGM released The Magnificent Yankee, a film that quietly spotlighted Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., one of America's most influential legal minds, based entirely on fact. Adapted from a Broadway play by Emmett Lavery, which drew from a biography by Francis Biddle, the film focused on Holmes's personal life with his wife Fanny and his mentorship of young law clerks, rather than his extensive legal legacy. Louis Calhern, reprising his stage role as Holmes, earned an Academy Award nomination for his portrayal, reportedly immersing himself in Holmes's letters and legal writings to capture the justice's intellect and wit. While the courtroom scenes were inspired by real cases, such as Holmes's dissent in the 1919 Abrams versus United States decision, the film took dramatic liberties typical of Hollywood. Released during the Cold War, The Magnificent Yankee gave Holmes's defense of civil liberties a timely resonance, reintroducing a legal titan to a generation grappling with freedom in uncertain times. The True Story of Jesse James. The true story of Jesse James, released in 1957, wasn't just another Western. It took aim at the legend itself. The film offered a grittier, more psychologically complex take on the infamous outlaw. While earlier portrayals leaned heavily into the Robin Hood myth, this version explored the chaos of post-Civil War Missouri, where Jesse James emerged not as a folk hero, but as a product of political resentment and guerrilla warfare. The screenplay drew from published historical accounts and contemporary press coverage rather than direct testimonies, but it still marked a shift in tone. Jesse's violent robberies, shifting loyalties, and betrayal by Robert Ford in 1882 were presented without the usual Hollywood polish. Some film historians point to this as a notable mid-century attempt to peel back the mythology surrounding James. Whispers even suggest that Ray's darker vision clashed with studio expectations, contributing to the film's lukewarm reception. Still, it ignited renewed curiosity about the real Jesse James, a man whose public image was shaped as much by sensationalist newspapers as by his own actions. The film may not have shattered box office records, but it's often credited for challenging the polished myths Hollywood once embraced. The Great Caruso. Released by MGM in 1951, The Great Caruso was more than a Technicolor showcase for Mario Lanza. It was a biopic rooted in the real-life rise of Enrico Caruso, who was born in 1873 and became one of opera's first international superstars. The film dramatized Caruso's journey from poverty in Naples to fame at La Scala and the Metropolitan Opera, with Lanza's on-screen triumphs closely mirroring Caruso's actual career. Though timelines and romance were embellished, the film's nostalgic weight resonated with audiences, making it one of MGM's top earners that year and sending its soundtrack up the charts. Lanza's powerful renditions of classic arias introduced opera to American audiences who rarely heard it outside concert halls. While some critics questioned the film's historical accuracy, its cultural impact was undeniable. Stories linger that Lanza felt overshadowed by the role, haunted by comparisons to Caruso himself. Regardless, The Great Caruso stands as a rare Golden Age musical that quietly told a true story, one many viewers never realized was real. The King and I. When The King and I dazzled audiences in 1956, few realized its story was woven from Anna Leonovan's embellished memoirs and colonial myth-making. Anna, who claimed to be a British governess in the Siamese royal court of the 1860s, actually concealed her Indian birth and Anglo-Indian heritage while recasting herself as a Victorian reformer. Her tales inspired Margaret Landon's novel and eventually the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, but Thai historians have long disputed her accounts. King Mongkut, depicted as a stubborn despot, was in reality a progressive scholar and diplomat, and the Thai government banned the film for its disrespectful portrayal, a ban that extended to the later adaptations, including the 1999 version with Jodie Foster. Yul Brynner's Oscar-winning turn as Mongkut became legendary, though some critics argue his performance leaned into outdated stereotypes. Costume designer Irene Sharaff's lavish creations for Deborah Kerr added Hollywood spectacle, even as they strayed from historical truth. The film's grandeur and musical charm helped mask its loose relationship with fact, blurring the line between adaptation and cultural myth-making, and leaving audiences to wonder where history ends and legend begins. Anastasia. In 1956, Ingrid Bergman won an Academy Award for her role in Anastasia, a film that spun a romantic tale of the lost Romanov princess found alive. What many viewers didn't realize was that the story drew from a real-life identity scandal that captivated Europe for decades. After the Romanov family's presumed execution in 1918, the absence of their remains fueled rumors that Grand Duchess Anastasia had survived. In 1920, a woman rescued from a Berlin canal claimed to be the missing Duchess, calling herself Anna Anderson. Her assertion sparked headlines, legal battles, and a media frenzy, with some European aristocrats lending her credibility despite inconsistencies in her story. The legend endured until the 1990s when DNA testing confirmed that all the Romanov children had perished in 1918, and that Anderson was, in fact, Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker with a troubled past. Yet the myth persists, perhaps because Anderson herself believed her story or was swept up by those eager to exploit the mystery. The film's enduring appeal lies in its artful blend of fact and fiction, tapping into the timeless human longing for lost royalty, hope, and the possibility of second chances. The Stratton Story. In 1949, MGM released The Stratton Story, a film that looked like standard baseball drama, but quietly drew from one of the most improbable real-life comebacks in sports. James Stewart played Monty Stratton, a Chicago White Sox pitcher whose career was cut short in November of 1938 after a hunting accident led to the amputation of his right leg. Most audiences had no idea the plot was pulled straight from Stratton's own life. What's even more surprising, he didn't hang up his glove. Stratton went on to pitch in semi-professional leagues by 1946, using a prosthetic leg and a throwing arm honed through sheer willpower. Directed by Sam Wood, the film avoided melodrama, choosing instead a restrained tone that stood out in an era not known for subtlety. Some film historians suggest it struck a chord with post-war audiences, particularly veterans adjusting to life with injuries. While no official records confirm it, rumors have long swirled that Stewart, a decorated veteran himself, worked closely with Stratton during production to mimic his movements. The film was a commercial hit and even earned an Academy Award for Best Writing Motion Picture Story, though it took liberties with some details, like portraying Stratton's return as a professional comeback rather than a semi-pro one. The core message held firm. Legends tease that Stratton may have even appeared in a background scene as a coach, though this remains part of the film's quiet mythology. Either way, the Stratton Story proved that resilience wasn't just a theme, it was the truth behind the reel. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.